Hello everyone and welcome to this month's Xero tip of the month. So for this month I'm going to be taking you through bank rules. Now for those of you that have been using Xero for a while, you'll probably have seen scenarios where Xero automatically provides you with potential matches to transactions that come through from your bank. Now, as you'll also probably be aware, is sometimes it doesn't get those things right. And also, if we need to split a transaction, say 50-50 between two codes, it doesn't tend to get that right either. This is where bank rules fit in. Now, in the demo file, you can see that I've already got a rule set up for this transaction here. But what I'm going to take you through is how to set up a rule from scratch. So the easiest way I found to set up a bank rule is to set it up once you have a transaction that's imported in that you can use as the basis for your rule. So if you have a transaction like this one here where you want to set up a rule, go to Options and Create Bank Rule. Now, I have found that sometimes people can be a bit intimidated by this screen. The easiest way to look at this is just to look at each section at a time, read what the question is saying, and answer one question at a time. Don't look at the whole thing and go, oh, how do I deal with this? One section at a time. That's the key. And this first section is the most important because this determines whether your rule works or whether it doesn't. So at this point here, the question you need to ask yourself, what is the key conditions that need to be met for this rule to be applied? Is it a fixed amount? Is it a certain supplier? Is it a certain supplier and a fixed amount? Or is it, could be any other thing like a description or a reference? Most commonly, I find it is either the supplier name or the other party name, an amount, or a combination of the two. Those are the most common basis for bank rules that I've seen. So in this instance here, I want to set up a rule for whenever my staff go to the bakery when they're out on jobs. So the amount is not going to be the same. So the reason I point that out is you can set up your bank rule to look at either the payee, the description, the amount, the reference, analysis code, or any other field. So here is where you're choosing the rules. Now, by default, it's going to come in with the payee, it's going to come in with the description. Now, the description in this case is not actually helpful to me. I don't want that to determine whether this rule works or not. So I'm going to take that line out. If I wanted to have amount, I could add a new line, choose amount, and then put in whatever the amount is. I don't in this case, so I'm going to remove that. If it was only amount, I could just change it in the drop down here and then update as need be. Now, if your rule is based on a supplier name or other party name, this box here is also very important. So this box determines, does the payee have to equal this name exactly? Or is it a case of the payee has to contain these set words? Now, the contains one is really important because sometimes transactions come through with a supplier name and then a bunch of numbers or something at the end of it, and those numbers change. So if you have a scenario like that, use contains, and that means that as long as this is in the payee name, the rule will work. This is probably one of the most common things that I find if a rule isn't working is because this has been set to equals and there's some other things in the payee name, and that means the rule hasn't worked. So as a general rule, I would normally use contains, even if I'm pretty sure there would never be any numbers against it. It just means that it's more likely that your rule will work when you want it to. Okay, and then, the other thing to note with this is you can choose the option of whether it has to be all conditions you've set or any. Most of the time I find all is what you want it set to, but if you wanted to say, okay, if this is true or this is true, this is where you can choose it to go any of those conditions. So that's what that box is there for. Now moving on to step 2, we can choose that when this transaction comes through, do we want to set up a new contact or do we want to use one we've already got? So in this box here, I'm going to start typing in, and I don't have that in my list, so I'm going to leave it as that, and that will ensure that this transaction goes against that contact name. You can also choose this to just pull in the payee. I don't recommend that if you've got the potential for payees to have numbers at the end, because what it will do is every time this transaction goes through is it creates a new payee with that new set of numbers. If you're unsure, you can just choose enter during reconciliation, and that means that when you're approving the application of that rule to that transaction, you have the option to say what the contact is. Now, step 3 and 4, you want to look at those together. So the first question is there a fixed value amount that needs to go to a set code? Most of the time, the answer is no. But if you have say a telephone bill and you know that $50 of it relates to the office phone and it's 100% claimed and it's always $50, that's where you would click on this and you'd put in the details of what that is and the amount. Bearing in mind, if you have tracking in your Xero file, the tracking options will also show up. If you don't know what that is, then all yours will look like will be description, account, tax rate, and amount. You won't have the region in your file. Most of the time, though, generally you want it to go to one place. So this is where the percentage or the ratio coding method comes in. So here I'm going to say staff meals. Now I don't think I've got a staff expenses code in here, so I'm just going to put it to general expenses for this time, and then I'm going to leave that as 100%. Now, if in this transaction instance you needed to split this between, say, drawings and, say, an expense code, you could add a new line, put in the drawings line, and then in the percentage column, you'd put one line as being 50% and the other as being 50. You can have as many lines as you like. The key is that all the lines total to 100 at the very end. So I'll just change that back to 100 so to get rid of that error message. Step 5, do you want the reference to be set during the bank rec, or do you want the reference to pull in based on the reference description, payee, whatever it is from that transaction? Now, do you want this rule to run on just the bank account you're starting this from, or all? If you're setting up a rule for, say, interest that you're receiving on a bank account balance or bank fees, I do recommend using the run this rule on all bank accounts option. That just means that you only have to set it up once and it applies across all your bank accounts. And the last one is give the rule a title. Now this is crucial because what you'll see when that rule is applied is this title. And if that title doesn't clearly explain what that rule is doing, then you're not going to have a clue as to what's happening and it could cause a bit of confusion at reconciling time. In this case, it's pulled in the payee. I'm happy with that because that does explain what it is. But you can change that to whatever you want it to be. Once you click Save, back in the bank rec screen, we can see that that rule has now been applied. I can click OK. It's also applied it for another transaction. And that's how you set up bank rules. Now, if you've set up a bank rule and you need to change it or update it, easiest way to do that is from the dashboard, click on the 3 dots and go to bank rules. You can do that from any bank account. Your bank rules will be sorted either into spend money rules, so money going out, money coming in, receive money, or transfer money, so moving money between bank accounts. You can edit any one of these and change any of the fields that we looked at previously. You can create a brand new one from here. However, I do recommend that you create them from the bank transaction because it is much more likely to work if you use the details that are pulled on from the bank rather than having to manually type it all in. And that, in a nutshell, is bank rules. Hopefully that helps you speed up your coding. If you have any topics you would like me to cover, please let me know. Thank you for your time.